Hello and welcome to the third episode for using the concept-based system for conceptual modeling and meta modeling. The topic is to create a new modeling language or a simple version of the entity relationship diagram language and then use it. And on the fly, we will learn how to use the different tools of the concept-based system, at least the main functions. So let's start off the concept-based user interface, CBIVA. It should auto-connect to a concept-based server that you see here with the green indicator. And now I roughly follow the concept-based tutorial number 2 on meta modeling. I will include a link below on how to do that. So let's start with the first step. So we are connected, and the next step would be to define a very simple entity relationship language. So I copy and paste the definition from the tutorial, and you see it here. Now let's remove the line numbers here. So under options, show line numbers, I deselect it, and then it's maybe more easy to read for you. So the first frame here defines entity types without further properties. So this is called an object definition or a frame. The name of the object is entity type, and it has no further properties. So and the keyword "and" indicates that this definition is complete. The next frame defines relationship type, and that indeed has one attribute, the role attribute, role link to entity type. So relationships types are connected by role links to entity types. Attribute is a predefined so-called category or attribute category in the system. So you can always use that when you define an object like relationship type. By default, all such attribute definitions are multi-valued. So a relationship type can have multiple role links to multiple entity types. Yeah, so that's the frame definition. That is in the text area of the TLOS editor. That's the text window here. And once you have defined it, you can store it in a database. So we call that in conceptbase actually to tell that the new information that you tell to the system. So press the tell button, that is the icon with the arrow pointing to this symbol for a disk. So tell that. So that was successful. It reports that in this log window. The yellowish color indicates that this was successful. Once you have done that, you can you can select the name of some object and then right-click and then load the object, and then you see just the frame of that object. You can press this button to clear the window. Then it's empty. Then the object is still defined in the database, only the text window is empty. You can display what is currently defined in your so-called module, that is the kind of the directory in which you work, by pressing this button here, the list current module button. That's this icon here under the help button. And then you see the definition with some comments here attached to it. So that's it. So let's remove that. And now the next task would be to find that entity type can also have their own attributes, namely attributes that define properties of the entity type. These properties must be values taken from a certain domain. So domain is another thing that is defined in the entity relationship notation. So that's the definition here. Domain is are here just a class or an object without further property. So we use that here in the definition of entity type. So we say it can have properties or attributes that have values of domain. So we use here attra to distinguish that from the predefined attribute category of concept base. Now you may have noticed the role link of relationship type is defined in a very similar way, and the role link is traditionally not regarded as an attribute in end relationship diagram notation. It's a link. Well, in concept base or the underlying knowledge representation language Telos, we do not make a difference between attributes and links. Actually, attributes are links. So that's why all the links in concept base are subsumed under the category attribute. So let's tell that here. That was successful. Let's introduce a little syntax mistake and make a typo here. And if we would tell that, then you would get some error message. In this case, we try to redefine attribute with another value class, domain something, and that is also not defined. So you get an error message. So note that we already defined it. So we have this definition of entity type. So now entity type and relationship type and domain are so-called meta-classes. Their instances are classes themselves, like the entity type employee. That would not be just a bottom-level object, a token, but that would be a class itself. The same with relationship type. That is a meta-class. Instances of relationship types are actually classes, so-called relationship types. Yeah. So let's populate now domain with some allowed types for domain. So let's say that string and integer are both domain. So that's the definition. That's a new expression here. The in here, in integer in domain and string in domain and. The keyword in means the thing on the left-hand side is an instance of the thing at the right-hand side. So integer is defined as an instance of domain, and string is defined as an instance of domain as well. Integer and string happen to be predefined, but never mind. This is possible. Note that we define here two instantiations in one step. So you can have one or two or any number of definitions in one transaction that you send to the concept-base server. So let's tell that, and that should work. So let's delete that. The next step would be to define a new domain for dates and to define some values for date. So let's do that here. So date happens to be undefined before, but we can define it with this step. So date is now defined. And let's define two sample dates. We have to use quotes if the object name contains any special character like the minus character here. So this is double quote, and we can define it. Note that I didn't remove the first line date in domain. If we tell it again, then no new object is created, but the system will recognize that this is already defined and will not insert it again. Yeah, so we have just one definition of date. So let's see what is the current state of our database. We have defined entity type, we have defined relationship type, then domain, and then we have defined that entity type has an attribute domain. And then we defined integer and string as domain, then date and domain, and then the two examples of dates. This listing also tells you when this was created in comment lines. That is Greenwich Mean Time, universal time zone. So that's the same time here. Yeah, but this is just a comment here to as a help for you to see what was created when. So our next step would be to visualize what we have. So that was the textual window. So let's visualize what we have. And well, let's do it again. So under Browse, we select Graph Editor. That's the graphical editor of conceptbase. We have to give a start object from which we start to display the content of our database. And let's say we start with a relationship type. The second line is the graphical palette. We currently only have the default palette here at our disposal. We can add new palettes, but that's something that we can do in another episode. And then we can specify the module, so the kind of the directory in which we work. That's our current module in which we work. So that opens a new window. That displays relationship type as a node. We can move the mouse pointer on that, and we can move it. This graph window here has its size. We can maximize it. Then we can right-click on that to see some options. And the first interesting one is outgoing attributes. That are the attributes defined for relationship type. Note that attributes includes any links. So that has currently a role link to entity type. So that's this one, and then we can show the attribute of entity type that is this one, and when we can show the instances of domain, right-click and then instances. So we currently have 3 instances: date, integer, and string. Never mind that these 2 here are in another color. That is because of the settings in the default graphical palette that we are using. Integer and string are predefined classes, and they are using this blue color to indicate that. Now remember that date has some instances, so we can display these 2 instances. So that's the current state of the database. Yeah, so if you move the cursor here on that, you can move that. You can also press a Control-Shift button at the same time, then click again, and then the lines are straightened up. If you double click on that, you see the frame definition of that object. If that's a large definition, then you have to scroll here. If you double click again here on the top, so when the cursor changes its shape, then you get back to the original. Yeah, so that more or less completes the first view into the use of the system. So I close this window. I stop that, and now we are done.